Lakers series, and Chris couldn't. I mean, he just didn't have his handle, right? Remember, it seemed like
he was
nerve
hurt. Remember that
from the shoulder, little nerve issue, right?
Fingers,
so to see him have that ball so tight and be Chris Paul point guard, it was nice to see. Let us now welcome in a man who is no stranger to an NBA Finals. The gentleman here earlier, Robert, we're talking about, hey, you never know when you're going to get to a Finals. It took Chris Paul 16 years to get here. Guess what? Robert Horry was here and won it 7 times. Welcome, of course, to the show, Robert. So happy to have you today.
Thanks for having me. I wish I could be in Phoenix with you guys, but I'm in the studio by myself enjoying this moment, but I think I know why I'm not in Phoenix.
Well, we'll get to your history against the Phoenix Suns shortly. Don't worry, that will be addressed on today's show. But I do want to get to Adam Silver and the commissioner's comments last night, guys. He gave his sort of annual Game 1 of the Finals address, and among the questions he got was about the play-in tournament, whether it was here to stay after working first in the bubble, kind of an emergency triage situation, and then this year in that COVID-shortened season. Take a listen to what Adam said.
It's my expectation that we'll continue it for next season. We both, of course, need agreement from our teams and the Players Association. And I know, Michelle Roberts doesn't have an easy job. She has 450 players. Some maybe have louder voices than others at the table. But again, I think ultimately, although there were critics, not just LeBron, but others who weren't in favor of it, and maybe some teams who weren't thrilled with it, I think overall it was very positive for the league and the players. I mean, certainly there's been some suggestions about some tweaks we should consider. It's my expectation that it will continue for next season.
So, Robert, you were right in the thick of this because the other broadcast team you work with locally in LA, the Lakers, that Lakers squad, was in the play-in tournament. So you got to see it up close. Do you think it was a success this past year? Are you happy that it seems like it's going to stay?
I'm happy for the fans, but personally, I'm not a fan of it because I hate when a team works so hard to get in that 8th spot. The next thing you know, you have to play one game, you have a bad game, you lose that game, then you got to play another game, and you have another bad game, you lose that game. So I'm thinking like Steph Curry. We missed a golden opportunity to see a guy who should have been MVP play in the playoffs, do some things that's extraordinary. But because they didn't win, because they fought so hard to get to that 8th seed, they're not in the playoff. So we missed that. And there's no disrespect to Ja Morant because he's an up and rising star. He's trying to get his foot in the door so people can know who he is. But Steph has both feet in the door. He's in the building. We know who he is. And I wanted to see that because this guy could have did something. Who knows? He could have got to the second round and upset Utah. So that's why I'm not a fan of the play-in.
Robert and I had this very discussion on camera before the play-in. And really what I learned from his, that's a persuasive case you can't argue that he just made. But what I learned is there are 2 separate cases here that are not going to intersect. Like, going into this, Robert had convinced me because everything he said I agree with. Mm-hmm. And then I watched it. Right. And I was like, oh, my God, this is so exciting, the drama and the pressure. So if I was playing, I would not want any part of this. But as somebody just watching it and observing it, I can't wait to get in front of the TV with the popcorn.
Right.
Or if I'm there in person, which I hopefully going forward with no pandemic, we can see it's so exciting to watch. So I just think there's a difference of opinion, which is never, again, not going to overlap or intersect.
Completely understand where Rob is coming from as a player fighting. I've been on a team that's an 8th or 7th seed, and I would have been mad if we got knocked out in a playing game for the situation. But from a fan's perspective, because I'm a fan now, I loved it. It kept the enthusiasm. It kick-started the playoffs, and viewership was off the charts.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. But I will say this. We need to start talking to players more and listening to players more because we're also hearing that they could do a mid-season tournament, which I don't think is a good idea at all. Yeah. You have to get these guys some rest. You have to listen to them because the game is so much different now than it was when I played, definitely when Rob played. So the wear and tear on these guys' bodies is different. We saw a lot of injuries, and, this kind of stuff can add to it. So, again, I love it from a fan standpoint. I know the fans love it from a player standpoint. I want to know what they think, and you've heard what they think, and they don't really like it.
But can I add something, though?
Please, Robert.
The interesting thing is we lucked up this year. We had Steph Curry, Ja Morant. We had 4 teams without injuries, probably been top 4. Think about that. We lucked up. Will we be like this next season where the top guys are hurt and they're on I won't say sorry team, but they failed they fell to a lower seed. So will we have that next season? That's my problem with the play-in tournament.
That is how a man with 7 rings talks.
Yes.
He can just say, oh, yeah, that team's sorry. I'm just going to be straight with all of you. I will say also as a fan, the idea that it created 3 different levels of competition and that kind of dead part toward the end of the regular season that sometimes feels, just a slog to get through.
No tanking. Tanking. People were trying to they thought they could get in.
Okay, we had a little tiny bit of tanking.
Okay, but less than usual.
Houston, Oklahoma City. But I will say this, that you had the competition at the top for those top seeds, right? Like you always have. You had that competition at the 6th spot, right? Don't get in the play-in tournament. And then even the 9 or 10 teams, right? I love seeing the Wizards be involved in this, and they were a team that wouldn't be in the playoff bracket if they hadn't been. So it was nice to see all of that. We will find out. He was also asked, Adam Silver, about the idea of further expansion in the NBA. Seattle. Here's what he had to say about that.
In terms of expansion, I know that was reported that, when revenues were down, we were looking more seriously at expansion. I mean, it didn't work exactly like that, largely because expansion's a multi-year process. So it wasn't as if the pandemic came, we're 40% down, we can quickly collect some expansion revenue. Yes, it's true that we actually had some time while we were initially shut down and we were meeting more often with our team to think a little bit more about it. But it seemed the consensus was, certainly during a pandemic, that wasn't the right time to expand, but that you should continue to consider it.
Mr. Wilbon, you have seen a lot of teams move around in the NBA. You've seen expansion. What are your thoughts about the league expanding soon?
Put a team in Seattle. I don't care what else you do. Getting out of Seattle was a bad move. It was a bad move for the optics. It was a bad move for business. Put a team in Seattle. It's one of the great cities in North America, if not the world. Put a team there. I understand that Vegas would help, balance that. Fine, do that too. Moving out of Seattle was a bad idea, and as soon as the NBA can reverse that, the better everybody will be.
Yeah, Vegas and Seattle are my 2 picks. And if you look at it, too, some people say, are you going to water down the competition? To me, you just lose a 3rd star of the team. So now you're going back to trios you're going back to 2 stars, duos instead of trios. So I think it's a great opportunity. It brings more jobs to people, players, staff, the city, economy. So obviously the NBA is in a great spot, but who wouldn't want to see 2 more teams, especially if they're going to be in Seattle and Las Vegas?
Well, look, there's 2 ways you could get a team back in Seattle. You could expand, or, of course, the team left Seattle because of just a team moving. There's been speculation with Alex Rodriguez being one of the new partners owning the Minnesota Timberwolves. Would he want to move that team to Seattle? Obviously, there's plenty of Wolves fans in Minnesota who would not like to see that happen. We will just have to watch all of that play out. Mr. Wilbon, now, Robert, I know that you can't see this necessarily from where you are, but Mr. Wilbon, who is about to leave us, came casual today, and I just wanted to know your thoughts before we say goodbye to him.
I see the shorts. I see the legs. I see that. I see you, Will.
Robert knows how hot it is here.
Hey, I was just there 3 weeks ago. It was 120, so I understand why you got the shorts on.
Exactly.
That's
there you go.
Hall of Fame status. You can go and do that once you're in the hall.
You can get to do whatever you please. Mr. Wilbon, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, putting up with Robert. Good seeing you. Even though it's distant, I thought you were going to be here. And it's always good to be with Matt Barnes. Always. Very
good. We will see you on PTI later today. Everyone else, stick around with us. We are going to have Suns guard Cam Johnson joining